When I saw the address on my husband's phone, I thought it was just a delivery mistake. But that small line of text, a place I had never heard of, would eventually tear my entire life apart. It was a quiet Sunday morning, the kind where sunlight spills lazily through the curtains, and the house smells like coffee and warm bread. I was folding laundry in our bedroom, humming to the faint sound of birds outside. My husband, Daniel, was in the shower. His phone buzzed once, twice, then went silent. Normally, I wouldn't touch it. We'd been married 12 years. I trusted him, or at least I believed I did. But something about that morning felt off. Maybe it was the way he'd smiled absently at breakfast, or how he'd left his phone on the nightstand instead of taking it with him. Something he never did. The screen lit up again, showing a notification from a courier app. Delivery confirmed at 243, Brookfield Avenue. My fingers froze mid-fold. Brookfield Avenue? We didn't live anywhere near that street. In fact, I'd never even heard him mention it. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring at that glowing screen. My heart began to beat faster, a small, steady thud in my chest. Curiosity wrestled with hesitation. It's probably a work delivery, I told myself. Maybe something for the office. But then I saw the message beneath it, a text from a number I didn't recognize. Thanks for the crib. It's perfect. A crib. That one word changed everything. Until that day, my life had been simple, quiet even. I worked part-time at the library. Daniel was a project manager at a construction firm, often busy, always tired but reliable. We didn't have children. After years of trying, we had stopped talking about it altogether. Our house sat in a small cul-de-sac where everyone waved politely but minded their own business. I knew the neighbors' dogs by name, the grocery clerk who saved me the softest peaches, the old woman 2 doors down who always asked about my garden. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, a life built on small rituals and trust. Every evening, Daniel would come home around 7, smelling faintly of sawdust and cologne. We'd eat dinner together, usually something simple like pasta or stir-fry, and talk about our day. Lately though, he'd been distracted. He'd check his phone during dinner, glance at it with a frown, then set it face down. When I'd ask who it was, he'd just say, work stuff. He'd started coming home later too. At first, he blamed deadlines, then traffic, then client dinners. Each excuse was reasonable enough on its own, but stacked together, they began to sound rehearsed. I remember one night vividly. It was raining heavily, thunder rolling in the distance. I was curled up on the couch, watching old movies, waiting for him. He came and soaked, his shirt clinging to him. When I reached for his jacket to hang it, he snatched it back, too quickly, too defensive. It's just wet, he said, avoiding my eyes. I'll handle it. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But that tiny moment, the way his shoulders stiffened, planted the first real seed of doubt. Back to that morning, standing with his phone in my hand, I could feel that seed sprouting. The water stopped running. Panic shot through me, and I quickly placed the phone back where it was. By the time Daniel stepped out of the bathroom, towel around his neck, I was back at the dresser, pretending to fuss over laundry. He smiled at me, that same easy, familiar smile I'd fallen in love with years ago. Morning looks good on you, he said softly, kissing my cheek. But I couldn't smile back. I mumbled something about needing to get groceries and slipped out of the room. All day, the words replayed in my mind. Thanks for the crib. Whose crib? Why was he sending baby furniture to an unknown address? Was there a woman involved? A baby? The thought made my chest ache. I spent the afternoon trying to convince myself there was a logical explanation. Maybe he was helping a coworker. Maybe it was charity. But deep down I knew people don't hide kindness. They hide guilt. That night, I brought up the topic casually. Hey, you ever heard of Brookfield Avenue? I asked as we ate. He looked up briefly, then shrugged. No. Why? Oh, I saw it mentioned on one of your work messages earlier. His fork froze midair for a fraction of a second, just long enough for me to notice. Then he smiled, forcing a laugh. Oh, that? Must have been from the delivery guys. We're working on a renovation site near there. He said it so smoothly that, for a moment, I almost believed him. Almost. Later that night, as he slept beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. The rain had started again, tapping gently against the windows. Every sound felt amplified. The rhythmic tick of the wall clock, his slow breathing, the faint rustle of sheets. I turned the phrase over and over in my head. Delivery confirmed at 243 Brookfield Avenue. The more I thought about it, the less it felt like work. The more it felt personal. And deep down, I knew something was coming. Something that would shatter the illusion of safety I'd built around us. I just didn't know it would come so soon. The next day, while Daniel was at work, I decided to look up the address. 243 Brookfield Avenue. Google Maps showed a modest suburban house, maybe 20 minutes away. Beige siding, blue shutters, small garden. Nothing remarkable. Except for one thing, it wasn't near any of the project sites Daniel had mentioned before. I sat there, staring at the screen, my stomach tightening. I thought about calling him, asking directly. But I didn't want another smooth lie. I wanted truth. Cold, undeniable truth. So I decided to go there myself. I told myself it was curiosity. But really it was fear. The kind that gnaws at your gut until you can't eat, can't sleep, can't breathe without wondering what you don't know. When I pulled up to the street that afternoon, my heart was racing so hard I thought I might faint. I parked a few houses away, hands gripping the steering wheel. The house was smaller than it looked online. A tidy front yard, potted plants, wind chimes swaying softly. And then the door opened. A woman stepped out, holding a baby. I froze. She was young, maybe late 20s. Dark hair tied back, wearing a soft blue robe. The baby was wrapped in a blanket patterned with tiny stars. She looked tired, but content. And as she turned to close the door, I saw him. Daniel. Standing in the doorway, holding a stuffed toy, smiling. Smiling the same way he used to smile at me. For a long moment, I couldn't move. The world around me seemed to blur. The soft hum of the wind, the distant sound of a lawn mower, even the gentle rattle of the wind chime. It all faded into silence. There was only him. Daniel. My husband. Standing at the door of another woman's house, smiling like a man at peace. The woman leaned in to say something, and Daniel reached out. His hand brushed her shoulder, gentle and familiar. She laughed. That single gesture shattered something deep inside me. I pressed a trembling hand to my mouth, afraid I'd scream. Instead, a soundless sob escaped, and I sank lower in the seat, hidden behind the steering wheel. I don't remember how long I sat there, staring at them through tears. Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe an hour. My mind refused to accept what my eyes saw. It didn't make sense. We couldn't have children. Years of treatments, endless doctor visits, silent prayers. And yet, there he was, holding a baby like he'd been waiting his whole life for that moment. A part of me wanted to storm up to that house, knock on the door, and scream until the truth spilled out. Another part, the quieter, more terrified part, wanted to drive away and pretend I'd seen nothing. But when Daniel kissed that baby's forehead again, smiling the same way he'd smiled at me the day he proposed, I knew pretending was no longer an option. I started the car and drove off, not knowing where I was going. I ended up at the pier by the lake, the one where we used to go when life felt heavy. It was where we'd shared picnics, arguments, laughter. Now it was where I sat, gripping the steering wheel, trying to breathe through the panic clawing at my chest. The afternoon sun glimmered on the water, but I felt nothing. Just numbness. Every thought ran into another. Who is she? How long has he known her? How long has he been lying to me? Is that his baby? The questions had no answers, only pain. When I finally got home, the house felt unfamiliar. Every photo, every memory, every small trace of our life together looked tainted. His jacket hung by the door. His slippers were by the couch. The smell of his cologne lingered faintly in the hallway. It was all so normal. Yet I knew now that the man behind it wasn't. That night, I didn't wait for him. I couldn't. When Daniel came home around 8, his hair was damp, freshly showered, probably from her house. He smiled at me like always. Hey, sweetheart. You okay? You look tired. I looked up from the sofa, forcing calm. Just a long day. He nodded, loosened his tie, and went to the kitchen to grab a drink. Same here, he said casually. Clients are driving me crazy this week. I studied him. Every word that came out of his mouth now sounded like theater. How's the project near Brookfield? I asked lightly. He froze. Not long, not obviously, but enough for me to notice. It's coming along, he said, back still turned to me. Why? I swallowed hard. Just curious. He turned then, smiling faintly. You're asking a lot of questions lately. Maybe because I don't get many answers. He raised an eyebrow, half amused, half irritated. What's that supposed to mean? I stood up. Nothing. Forget it. He walked toward me, still playing the role of the patient husband. You're imagining things again, Claire. You worry too much. There it was, the gentle gaslighting I hadn't noticed before. The way he used my sensitivity against me. The way he disarmed me with calmness. But not tonight. Tonight, I knew the truth. I wanted to scream it at him. Tell him I'd seen everything. But instead, I let him keep talking. Every lie stacking higher, every word cutting deeper. He talked about deadlines, about clients, about how tired he was. And I just nodded, silent, memorizing the face of the man I'd once trusted. Later, when he fell asleep beside me, I watched him for a long time. His face looked peaceful in the dim light, innocent, almost boyish. How strange it was, I thought, that that someone could destroy your entire world and still sleep so easily. Over the next few days, I lived a double life. To Daniel, I was still the same wife, warm, quiet, predictable. But inside, I had turned into something else. A detective. A ghost. I began to collect evidence. Quietly, carefully. I checked phone bills, bank statements, receipts. At first, nothing stood out. But then, I found it. A recurring charge for a storage unit I'd never heard of, a second phone bill under his name, and monthly transfers to an account labeled only with initials. AM. The same initials as the woman I'd seen on the mailbox at Brookfield Avenue, Amelia Moore. Every discovery felt like another knife twisting deeper. I found pictures too, buried in old emails. One was of a baby's nursery, half-painted walls, a wooden crib. Another, from a year ago, of Daniel at a restaurant I didn't recognize, with her. His hand rested on hers. They looked happy. That one broke me. I remember sitting on the kitchen floor, the phone trembling in my hand, and whispering to myself, why wasn't I enough? The question hung in the air like a wound that would never close. 2 nights later, I decided to confront him. I waited until after dinner, when the house was quiet. Daniel, I said softly, folding my hands to stop them from shaking. Who is Amelia Moore? The fork clattered against his plate. He looked up, eyes wide for a split second before narrowing. What? Don't lie to me, I said, voice trembling but steady. I know about her. And the baby. Silence. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like he couldn't find words. Then he sighed, running a hand through his hair. Claire, you don't understand. Then help me, I whispered. Make me understand. His voice cracked. It wasn't supposed to be like this. My heart pounded. Then how was it supposed to be? He looked away. I made mistakes. Mistakes? My voice rose. You built a second life, Daniel. A house, a child. While I was here waiting, believing every lie you told me. He slammed his hand on the table. You couldn't give me what I wanted. The words hit me like a slap. I froze. What you wanted? I repeated slowly. He looked down, breathing hard. A family. A child. I didn't plan for it to happen, but when Amelia got pregnant, I couldn't just walk away. I felt my world tilt. So you kept both of us, I said quietly. 2 homes. 2 women. 2 lies. His voice broke. I didn't want to lose you. Tears burned my eyes. You already did. That night I packed a small bag and left. I didn't know where I was going. Only that I couldn't sleep under the same roof as him anymore. As I closed the door behind me, I looked back one last time. The man who once vowed to protect my heart stood in silence, his face pale, his mouth trembling. And for the first time in our marriage, I didn't feel sorry for him. I felt free and terrified, all at once. The night air was cold when I stepped outside, carrying nothing but a small bag and my car keys. For a moment, I stood by the front gate, frozen between 2 worlds, the life I had built and the one I had just destroyed. I got in the car and started driving. No destination. No plan. Just the hum of the tires against the empty road, and the sound of my own heartbeat echoing in my chest. I ended up at my sister Lily's house. When she opened the door, she took one look at me, the red eyes, the shaking hands, and pulled me into a hug. Claire, what happened? I tried to speak, but the words got caught in my throat. All that came out was a whisper. He has a baby. Lily stiffened. Who? Daniel, I said, my voice breaking. With another woman. For a moment, she didn't say anything. Then she led me to the couch, wrapped me in a blanket, and sat beside me. Tell me everything. And I did. From the moment I followed him, to the confrontation, to the way he said I couldn't give him what he wanted. By the time I finished, tears were streaming down both our faces. Lily clenched her fists. That selfish bastard. I stared blankly at the floor. I don't know what to do now. She looked at me gently. You already did the hardest part. You walked away. The next morning, I woke up in her guest room. The world felt heavy, but quieter somehow. For the first time in years, I didn't hear Daniel moving around the kitchen, didn't smell his coffee, didn't hear his voice saying, "Morning, sweetheart." It was strange. The silence hurt, but it also felt like peace. Lily made breakfast, and while I pushed my food around the plate, she said, "You need to think clearly now. What's your plan?" "My plan?" I echoed. "I don't even know who I am without him." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You're the woman who survived his lies. That's who you are." In the following days, I started taking small steps. I met with a lawyer, a calm, sharp-eyed woman named Sarah who listened carefully as I explained everything. When I told her about the second phone, the storage unit, the baby, she nodded slowly. "You have grounds for divorce on the basis of infidelity and deception," she said. "But if the baby is his, there are financial implications." The words "the baby" made my stomach twist. It still didn't feel real. That there was a child out there who shared his blood, when I had spent years crying over negative pregnancy tests. I felt robbed twice, once of love and once of motherhood. A few days later, I went to the storage unit address I'd found on the statement. When the manager let me in, my hands trembled. The air smelled faintly of dust and old wood. Inside were boxes labeled baby clothes, crib parts, photos. I opened one. Inside was a stuffed giraffe, the kind of toy you'd give to a newborn. There were pictures too, Daniel holding the baby, Amelia smiling beside him. A family portrait, neatly framed, waiting for a wall. I sank to the floor, clutching the photo. Tears spilling down my cheeks. He hadn't just cheated. He'd replaced me. That night, when I returned to Lily's, I made a decision. No more tears. No more questions. I was done being the victim of his story. I was going to write my own. The next morning, I called my lawyer. I want to proceed, I said firmly. Are you sure? She asked. Yes. And I want him to know I'm not afraid anymore. We filed for divorce that same week. When the papers were served, Daniel tried to call me, over and over. I ignored him. But on the third day, I picked up. His voice was desperate. Claire, please just talk to me. I took a deep breath. There's nothing left to say. I made a mistake, he said quickly. I didn't mean for any of this. You didn't mean to lie? You didn't mean to build a second life behind my back. My voice shook with fury. You don't accidentally destroy someone's heart, Daniel. You make choices. He went quiet. I loved you, I said softly, even when it hurt. But you didn't love me enough to be honest. And now, I'm finally choosing myself. Then I hung up. It felt like closing a chapter, one I'd been trapped in for far too long. Weeks turned into months. Healing wasn't easy. Some mornings, I still woke up expecting to hear his voice. Some nights, I caught myself reaching for the empty side of the bed. But slowly, I started to rebuild. I went back to painting, something I hadn't done in years. I reconnected with old friends. I began therapy where I learned to stop asking, why wasn't I enough? And start saying, he wasn't capable of enough. The difference changed everything. One afternoon, months later, I got a letter from Daniel. It wasn't angry or defensive. It was quiet, almost remorseful. He wrote that the baby, Emma, was growing fast. That Amelia had left him. That he was sorry, truly sorry for what he'd done. I read it twice, then placed it in a drawer. Forgiveness wasn't something I could give easily. But for the first time, I realized I didn't need to hate him to be free. I just needed to let go. That evening, I drove back to the lake, the same place where I'd cried months ago. The water shimmered in the fading sunlight, and a soft breeze brushed my face. I stood there for a long time, breathing deeply, feeling the weight of the past lift off my shoulders. Then I whispered to the wind, "Thank you for breaking me, Daniel. Because now, I know how strong I can be."